Good afternoon, Wealth Our Way Nation. What is going on? It is your man, Charles Tank Harris, the founder and chief visionary officer of the financial literacy platform, Wealth Our Way, where our motto is wealth is not only for the wealthy. I welcome you all to episode 11, The Importance of Leverage. I want to thank each and every one of you who are watching with me live as I stream across the Wealth Our Way Facebook page and YouTube page. I also want to give a special shout out and salute to Wealth Our Way Nation that watches this program pre-recorded overnight on the weekends or wherever 15 minutes of financial literacy can get squeezed in. And of course, I want to say what's up to the Life 101 platform who listens to the audio of this recorded program. So with that being said, I hope everybody had an amazing weekend. Mine was great. Did a lot of traveling, back in home base in the lab. The lab is not air conditioned. I have to, my people, I'm sworn off from shout outs during the program. So I'm going to put in the comments my hellos. But the reality is that I'm back in the lab. I hope the audio sounds good because I do have a fan on kicking air to my right because I don't have my centralized air unit in the lab here. With that being said, this week we are going to talk about leverage, debt, and credit. I'm going to say those words again: leverage, debt, and credit. Why are there three different words? Because they are three different things. I know oftentimes, once again, when you run a financial literacy platform, you have to be a stickler for definitions. You have to be very, very, intentional with what you explain to people because there are subtle differences and nuances to different words and what they mean in the financial realm. Debt and leverage seem to be synonymous with one another, but there is a major difference, and we're going to cover that in the definition portion today. Credit is the common ground between debt and leverage. So we're going to also cover the importance of that. I touched on it last week. We kind of got into a little econ lesson with the importance of understanding inflation and just currencies and supply and demand. And before that, we were doing portfolio building. I hope you guys always know there is a rhyme and a reason for what I cover on this 15-minute program. Right now, I want to talk about the importance because I normally take experiences that I have, I say in real life, but this is real life as well. But I take experiences that I have with my client base. And when I go over topics with my clients, and I see areas that they're struggling to understand or maybe haven't had exposure to before, it's always something that I put a little note down and remind myself to cover with the broader audience. That's why I'm always telling you guys, if you have an idea, a question, a concern, anything that you're thinking, share it with me so I can cover it. Because if you have that question, that concern, that area of something that you don't quite understand, it is a strong possibility and more likely a probability that someone else is having that same thought, concern, question, and maybe a little too shy to bring it to the group. So anything that comes up that makes you guys think, hey, I'd like to know more about that, that's what I am here for. If I do not know it off the dome, I will do some research, interpret the research that I have procured from the internet and from other sources, and bring it back to you guys live and funky how I tend to do. So credit, debt, leverage. Let's talk about it for a minute. I did a program last Friday. I was sharing that with you guys for the United Way, the shout out to United Way and the Racial Equity Challenge. We were talking about things that really hit home for me, because you guys know that Wealth Our Way was founded on three pillars, or at least you should know because I talk about it all the time. The first pillar is to provide financial literacy and services to underserved communities. The second one is to put more people in seats like mine that look like me, sound like me, can relate to me. The reality is that it's hard enough to start to try to build wealth without going into the office of someone that makes you feel uncomfortable or doesn't understand your needs or concerns. So those same underserved communities need to also have financial professionals that they can feel comfortable with. The third pillar is what we're going to talk about this week. The third pillar is access to capital. The third pillar is, I touched on it the other day, talking about the GI Bill and talking about the racial wealth gap. On Friday, we covered the color of money. Underserved communities, and this has nothing to do with color of skin. When you're come from a community that is traditionally redlined, traditionally expected to not have a lot of wealth in it, whether you are white, black, Asian, Hispanic, doesn't matter. Those areas oftentimes don't have financial institutions there. I was very shocked the other day. I was riding through Newark, New Jersey, doing a program for my client, Tyre Whitehead. Shout out Tyre. Doing that program and riding through sections of Newark that reminded me of my hometown of Philadelphia that can, have some sections that are quite challenging economically. And I saw an area, with me not being from Newark, I don't know if they're going through gentrification or not, but the area looked like you better keep your doors locked, keep your head on the swivel. Anything could go down at that area at any given time. But what I found very impressive about the area, on the 4 street corners, one side had a Bank of America, the other side had a Wells Fargo, and the other side had a JP Morgan Chase branch. And the fourth one had a church. So when you go to neighborhoods like that, normally the assumption is no one has any money around here. Why have a bank? Or there's a lot of crime here. Why have a bank? I think now what we are seeing across the country is the understanding that there is capital. I don't want to use the word wealth because wealth is, subjective, but there's access to capital and there's an abundance of capital in even the most impoverished of looking communities. People who have worked their whole life, have saved money, have pensions, retired, rolled over retirement plans. There are a lot of millionaires living in row homes. So you don't see it because they don't floss it, or they don't even know that the value of what they have. My grandmother, great-grandmother, rest her soul, she worked for the railroads in Philadelphia, had a pension. She had a lot of her coworkers who were retiring with healthy pensions and 7-figure retirement accounts. So you can see that all the time. So let's go back to talking about this week's topics of leverage, debt, and credit. I'm going to give you some definitions, basically a comparison of debt to leverage. The best way for you to kind of identify the difference between debt and leverage is debt is, and I say debt, I'm sure some people may pronounce it a little different. That's my strong Philly accent. Debt is borrowing money to purchase anything. Debt is borrowing money to purchase anything. Leverage is borrowing money to purchase an appreciable asset. Debt is borrowing money to purchase anything. Leverage is borrowing money to purchase an appreciating asset. So why, some people can't distinguish between the two. Let me give you an example. A car, you go into debt to buy a car. I'm not talking about antique collectibles, because somebody out there will be smart and tell me that antique collectibles appreciate in value. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a day-to-day vehicle that you would put into service for yourself. If you take out a car loan to buy a car, that is debt. Conversely, a mortgage is leverage. A mortgage is taking on debt to purchase something that over time will go up in value. Also, nowadays, they do ask you to put money down when you buy cars most of the time. But normally, like when I first started buying cars, if you went into the car dealership to buy a car, you took out a car loan for the entire purchase price. You rolled in the taxes, you rolled in the registration fees, and your car note was 100% financed. Your car purchase was 100% financed. It was all debt. When you purchase a home, unless you're in some very, very unique program, and they do have them, you are required to come to the table with some form of money. So if you think about leverage as the ability to multiply money that you already have by borrowing, you will be able to understand much clearer the difference between leverage and debt. So if I go to buy a $400,000 home, I don't have $400,000 in my possession, but I do have $80,000. I can go to the closing table with 20% down of the value of the house. This is assuming there are no other closing costs, which we know isn't true, but let's keep my math clean, people. So $80,000 is what I am coming to the table with, but I'm purchasing an asset that is worth 400,000. The difference is being made up through a loan, which is debt. But what I truly did was leverage my $80,000 into the purchase of a $400,000 asset. I'm bringing this up because last week, or actually over the weekend, I had an interesting conversation with a client that was talking about their investment portfolio and some of the different assets that they wanted to purchase and how they were going to be able to purchase so much more of what they wanted to purchase because they were going to use leverage. They were going to go on margin in their investment account. Margin is another term that describes a form of leverage. When you are an investor and you are, let's just say you're at Merrill Lynch and you want to buy $10,000 worth of a particular company's stock, you don't actually have to put $10,000 cash into your account to buy the $10,000 of stock. They will let you leverage your own money to buy the stock. That is normally done at a 50% ratio. So that $10,000 of stock would only require you to put $5,000 of cash in your account. That's leverage. Now, that 50% requirement there's no playing around with that 50% requirement. So if the stock happens to fall in value, you would be asked to put more money in because you always have to maintain a 50% equity value on your purchase. So I confirm that when my clients are talking about going on margin, that they actually have the money to get called on their margin calls so that they're not overly leveraged and they don't have to start selling back the investments. When people who are very experienced are investing, a lot of times they will do what is called trading options. And I don't want to take too deep a dive in options trading. I don't recommend it to my audience. But when you buy an option contract, it is the right to purchase or sell the underlying stock in the future. And what you are able to do is use leverage because you don't have to pay for all of the stock at that moment. You just have to pay for that contract. And you can do what's called leveraging because the contract may be 1/10, 1/20th of the cost of the stock. So if you have enough money to buy 100 shares of something, you may be able to buy 500 options contracts, depending on the value of the contract. Now, if you see a movement upward in that stock, instead of just making the dollar for dollar movement because you own the stock, you would make a multiple of that because you own so many options contracts. That is one of the quickest ways to make money. But conversely, because we teach risk and reward here at Wealth Our Way, it is also one of the quickest ways to lose money. When you play on margin, when you do all of these options trading, all of these high risk leverage maneuvers, you open yourself up to a lot of risk. And in most instances, the risk is not necessary or warranted for a commonplace investor who is just looking to build long-term wealth. What I want to do this week is hammer down on how having a lack of access through financial institutions to capital has actually widened the racial wealth gap, has lessened the underserved community's ability to build wealth because we literally have to spend dollar for dollar for every bit of economic growth we get, as opposed to having access to credit and being able to leverage the money. I want to show you how it affects you in your investments. I want to show you how it affects you in real estate, because that lack of access is a great hindrance and burden to wealth creation and wealth building. That is why we're going to spend time this week on leverage, credit, and debt. So with that being said, I want to tell you guys, I'm glad that we have a new week. I'm excited about the material we're going to cover this week. I thank you guys for your time as always. And I want to remind you always, as I sign out, that wealth is not only for the wealthy. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.